What's going on, everybody? Tej back again for part 2 of this upgraded 2023 NFL mock draft. Today we cover round 2. Excited to bring it your way. If you missed yesterday's first round portion, definitely go back, check it out. And real quick before we start, a couple more favors to ask. Again, what do you think about this breaking up the videos? Do you like it? Does it allow me to elaborate? Do I talk too much? There were a couple times in yesterday's video I could catch myself getting excited and I was stumbling over my words, but that does come from just pure excitement. So do you like it as just one long video? Do you like it broken up into 2 different videos for each round? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And same thing I asked yesterday. How do you rank this QB class? I'd be fascinated to know who's QB 1, 2, and 3 for you, or if Bryce Young's your QB 1, just tell me who QB 2 is. Is it Stroud or Levis? Or is it Anthony Richardson for that point? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And one more comment to potentially add. Who's your favorite second round prospect? Who do you think slips out of the first round and is going to make some team very, very happy that they nabbed that player in the second round? Love to hear your thoughts, but without further ado, let's jump into it. And we start with the Pittsburgh Steelers. This pick comes virtue of the Chicago Bears via the Chase Claypool trade earlier on this season. And another reason I love using this mockdraftdatabase.com, you can see the pick I made yesterday, which was Christian Gonzalez. Now let's go attack the offensive line. Anton Harrison, to me, totally could sneak into the first round. But here at the top of the second, I think Pittsburgh gets an awesome value with Anton Harrison. I think a guy with over 1,000 snaps played might be a little, leaves a little to be desired when it comes to play strength. But other than that, he's looked great in pass protection. And you look at Dan Moore for Pittsburgh, yeah, that's an upgrade that's necessary. You got to do better there. And I wouldn't be surprised if you add that, last component of the offensive line if everything doesn't start to look a lot better in Pittsburgh for the O-line. Plus, this is essentially another first-round pick as it's pick number 32. A left tackle investment after you drafted Kenny Pickett last year just kind of makes sense as an organizational perspective. So Anton Harrison would love that pick there as a Steelers fan. Next up, the Houston Texans. We went Will Levis at number 2. We went Quentin Johnston. Now let's go to the defensive line. Let's get an edge rusher of the future, Isaiah Foskey. I think he makes a ton of sense as a hand of the dirt 4-3 edge rusher. We'll have to see what the next coaching staff for the Texans and what they bring in, what defense they want to run. But I think Foskey also kind of comes with some scheme versatility. I just love him in a 4-3 defense in specific. But let's go ahead and try to find that future edge rusher. They have had a myriad of guys come through, but nobody to really stick. And when Jerry Hughes is leading the way when it comes to pressures and hurries, like 3/4 of the way through the season, yeah, it's time to find that long-term answer. All right, next up, we get the Arizona Cardinals, and I'm going to go Antonio Johnson, a guy I totally think could go in the first round. And Byron Murphy's done a really nice job being able to move to outside. I think he had a couple of really great battles this year against DK Metcalf and Devontae Adams, which, playing boundary corner, those are 2 of the tougher assignments you're going to get in a year. So if he can continue to do that, and Antonio Johnson can become this strong safety nickel corner. I know you have Budda Baker there, but I think he's a good enough player and athletic enough to where maybe he plays free, and you're just kind of playing Budda Baker over the top and letting him make plays. And Antonio Johnson, let him be a player in the box, 6'3", 200, feels like he can stop the run at a high level, long arms too, so some hands on footballs, and I think minimum, you got a nice slot corner to try to round out that secondary that certainly needs some surplus of talent. So let's move on now to the Indianapolis Colts. I would love to see them add an Andre Carter II. For the minimum aspect of it, like Kwity Paye, this guy who's an awesome athlete, a lot of bend, awesome 3-cone numbers when he came out 2 years ago. And then Andre Carter, 6'7", 260, and I describe him as a locomotive every time I talk about him because he looks like he is, well, one, he's big, tall, and fast, so, it kind of makes sense. But he's coming for harm against offensive tackles. He's trying to run right through you if you're an offensive lineman. So I'd love to see that, one side has that speed finesse, one side has speed and power. I just kind of like the balance of that. But also this is a team that needs another edge rusher. So the kind of fit and value I think makes a ton of sense here. Andre Carter, just because of his draft profile and his upside, he could be a first rounder. So if you get him there at pick 36, I think that's a good nab for the Indianapolis Colts. All right, next up, the LA Rams. I'm going to go Clark Phillips III here. We'll have to see. They already have Troy Hill in that secondary, so maybe it's a little small, but it felt like a lot of times this year, the Rams' number 2 corner was getting picked on. I mean, the Bucs and that come-from-behind win against the Rams in Tampa were just picking on Darion Kendrick, and the guy ran in the 4.7, maybe even 4.8s last year, so it makes sense. So I'd like to see them address that number 2 corner spot. Interior offensive line totally could be in the cards. They could be looking for another edge rusher as well, but I'd like to see them address that CB2 spot, and maybe you move Troy Hill back into the nickel if that play, if you're going nickel in that coverage. But Clark Phillips, the concern might be, 5'10", 180. What's the arm length? He could have that Roger McCreary kind of knock against his draft profile. So we'll have to wait and see. But nonetheless, what we know right now, he's a sticky coverage defender who had a ton of turnovers created at Utah, one of the best defenses in country. So that's a pretty solid resume to me. And you get him early second round, that's a great value there for the LA Rams. So next up, I'm going to actually stick at the cornerback position. As promised yesterday, I went Anthony Richardson in the top 5, and then I went Siaki Ika. I've been looking for these edges and these long corners. Well, I am certainly going to give you a long, lanky corner here in Jalen Jones, 6'1.5", 6'2", right around 200 pounds, maybe a little bit short of that. One of those corners I need to do a little bit more process on, but I think the traits and the boxes he can check gives you a guy who could develop. And I mean, we're coming off an offseason where Seattle took a chance with Tariq Woolen. We see how that turned out. So I'm not saying Jalen Jones is going to be the next Tariq Woolen, not by any stretch, but it does set up a defense with 6'1.5", 6'2" on one side, and then 6'4" on the other. So I would be in love with that secondary. That's the type of defense I would want, and it kind of harkens back to the Legion of Boom days with Brendan Brown and Richard Sherman on the outside. So I think Jalen Jones could be worth the risk here, top of the second round for Seattle. Next up, we get the Las Vegas Raiders, and actually I think their offensive line got better as the year went on, with the exception of Andre James. I think, it's time to move on. They started for a couple of years. They thought they had the logical Rodney Hudson replacement in hand. I think it's time to go elsewhere there. Let's go with John Michael Schmitz, one of the best interior offensive linemen in this class. I think Osiris Torrance is guard 1. I think Luke Weipler, who I'm going to actually have be the pick here, is center 1. But John Michael Schmitz, I think, comes with position versatility. I wouldn't be surprised if he does end up playing guard at the next level. But my mindset here for the Raiders is he becomes your center of the future. Dylan Parham ideally gets better at year 2 at left guard, and you're continuing to build up that old line slowly but surely. But this team kind of got the short end of the stick yesterday in the first round by not being able to get a quarterback. So obviously that's a huge question mark that still needs to be addressed. And maybe Tanner McKee is in play here. And then for the Chicago Bears, I just think they can get better at center. This is a team that wants to run the football, and especially that wide zone scheme. I think Luke Weipler would be a great add there. I don't think they'll bring back David Montgomery, and I'm really excited to see if you're in a dynasty league and if at all ways can try to get Khalil Herbert in your squad. I think he's going to put up some gaudy numbers next year in that zone scheme. And I think Weipler's just an upgrade at center. So I think it's worth the add here at the top of the second. So next up, pick number 40. This is where I'm going to have Tanner McKee come off the board. Back-to-back drafts where I have him being the pick for the New Orleans Saints. I just don't know what they're going to do with the QB position. They're $50+ million over the cap. Getting a rookie contract at the quarterback position is a great first start for trying to clear up that cap. And then maybe in a couple years' time, that team can get back into playoff contention. Furthermore, Tanner McKee had a rough situation around him in Stanford. David Shaw felt like that tenure went on a little too long. There's a reason he resigns. Now, granted, he's also getting interviews with the Broncos, so, maybe he was a genius and we just didn't see it. But a bad offensive line, receivers who couldn't really get open, highest graded thrower into tight windows, also had the highest amount of throws into tight windows. So, again, speaking to receivers who couldn't get open, I think you put him in New Orleans, the offensive line is going to be better comparatively speaking, not even just literally getting better with talent, but I think comparatively speaking, the Saints O-line stacks up a whole lot better than what Stanford does in the grand scheme of the NCAA. And then you're talking about a team that just restructured the contract for Michael Thomas. Chris Olave is in the running for Offensive Rookie of the Year. I'm going to have my awards video coming out next week. Stick around for the channel to see that. Alvin Kamara. This could be an awesome situation for Tanner McKee to kind of step into and be in the best situation he's had in 3 years, potentially. So I'd be really interested to see what happens if he did end up going to New Orleans. Pick number 41, the Tennessee Titans. We went Peter Skoronski, and I really thought about Quentin Johnston. Because Quentin Johnston, that over-the-top speed, setting up the run with Derrick Henry and then play action off that with Quentin Johnston, feels like something straight out of my dreams. So I'm going to give you something similar, but obviously a lot smaller with Kayshon Boutte. He did end up declaring the NFL draft, kind of a confusing situation how that played out. But nonetheless, Kayshon Boutte's over-the-top speed. You have Treylon Burks going into year 2. All of a sudden, the play-action passing off of what is one of the best run games in football in Tennessee is lethal. And Kayshon Boutte can get behind just about any defense. So I think this is a really interesting pairing. And you get a left tackle, potential left guard upgrade at Peter Skoronski, and now you're adding some speed to the receiver position. Okay, Tennessee's offense starts to look a whole lot more scary through my eyes. Next up, pick number 42. I went Keandre Coburn, interior defensive lineman last time for Cleveland. Kind of going in a similar direction here. Maybe a little bit higher of an upside in Gervon Dexter. Another one of those massive human beings, kind of like what I talked about with Siaki Ika yesterday. I'm way more bullish on Ika than I am Dexter, but there is pass rush potential, and there's a ton of people who love what Gervon Dexter could potentially grow into. And for a team that's going to let Jadeveon Clowney walk, getting a potential, a high-level potential pass rusher from the middle could be a nice way to kind of counteract that loss. Obviously, finding another edge would go a long way, but massive human being that will help plug up the middle and ensure that run defense that has been pretty lackluster over the last couple of years, but also, again, the pass rush upside with, Myles Garrett on one edge. If you take away the ability for a quarterback to step up and evade Garrett because Dexter does his job in the middle, that defense gets really, really scary really fast. Getting to the New York Jets now at pick number 43. I'm going to go safety position here, Jordan Battle. We went off the tackle yesterday. I do think there's going to end up being an opening there. And then I look at that defense, and it's like linebacker and safety, long term. Those are the two places I think they can get an upgrade. And I'm still a huge Jordan Battle guy. May not be the most unbelievable athlete, but man, his ability to read and react, his football IQ is there. Sure tackler. I think he's really good in coverage, specifically zone, again, kind of leaning into his instincts, but he's had good tape in man coverage too. Potential tight end eraser, again, depending on the matchup, right? I don't know if he's athletic enough to go toe-to-toe necessarily with a Travis Kelce, but depending on the matchup, I think he could serve that role for the Jets. And again, just one of the few holes I see on that defense long-term. So Jordan Battle, love that pick there at 43. Obviously, I made it. Then we get to the Atlanta Falcons, sticking in the secondary. I go Emmanuel Forbes here. Another one of those SEC corners I need to dive into a little bit more. 6'1", 180 pounds, but I know a lot of people are really excited about his tape. And you look at his athletic profile, you go to draftbuzz.com, NFL Draft Buzz, that is. You can see some of the projected athletic measurables on top of his size and the ability to play in the SEC and holding his own at pretty decent PFF grades. I can see why a lot of people like him. He's just a guy I haven't fully gotten into and done a deep dive in when it comes to his tape. So I'm going off other people's consensus opinion here, or maybe not consensus, but other people's takes about Emmanuel Forbes, but also, I think the fit makes sense, right? Like Casey Hayward, 2-year deal when he signed that contract last offseason, but long-term, who's that number 2 corner opposite of A.J. Terrell? Let's try to find an answer here with Forbes. All right, moving on to the Green Bay Packers now. I'm going to also go safety for Green Bay. I thought about maybe edge here, but, Kingsley Enagbare I think has been solid. Preston Smith, he's kind of up and down to me, but Rashawn Gary is going to come back, and I hope in full force. But this is a team that has Adrian Amos becoming a free agent this year, and then Darnell Savage, a free agent next offseason. So I think in a couple years' time, safety could become a need. And Green Bay is one of those shrewd organizations that's always kind of thinking a year or two ahead. So I do give them credit there. And I think Brendan Joseph, if they can work the magic they did with Darnell Savage and Adrian Amos once he signed there, I'd love to see what Brendan Joseph's potential would be in Green Bay, right? Like, I think he's a really good athletic, over-the-top safety. He shored up a lot of his tackling woes that he had at Northwestern this year at Notre Dame. So I think he's a player that's on the rise. I think he'll have a good showing in Indianapolis. And I think he could be a long-term starter there for Green Bay. So Green Bay, the second-round pick's kind of hard because it's like, do you go IDL? I don't know. Devontae Wyatt's really looked good over the last couple of weeks. Edge, maybe, for a Preston Smith replacement in some time. But I like going long-term. Maybe there's a eventual starting position available at safety. And if not, I'd love to see the Packers incorporate some more 3 safety sets. Let me see some more big nickel. Get Darnell Savage in the box. I'd love to see some more of that. Next up, New England Patriots at pick number 46. I told you, a lot of Patriots fans are going to be yelling at me for Devin Witherspoon. What about wide receiver? What about wide receiver? How about I give you Josh Downs? I'm kind of thinking Jacoby Myers is going to walk, so I think that opens up a position there in the slot. And Downs, I think, is best suited as that slot wide receiver of the future. A guy who can be an awesome satellite weapon. And, when I think about the Patriots, the most dynamic player I saw on the offensive side with the ball in their hands was Marcus Jones. On that one touchdown they scored, I can't remember what week it was or who they were playing, but they got blown out. Marcus Jones had the one offensive touchdown. That's not going to fly, right? So getting some guy with that dynamism in there, great satellite weapon, draw up a bubble screen and let Josh Downs do the rest. That type of guy. Get him in space and let him just be a freak with the ball in his hands. But I also think there's some downfield speed. I'd love to see how they could potentially tap into him as a potential downfield weapon. So I think he can win at multiple points of the field and obviously receiver a position of need. And I do think there is going to be a slot opening. So let's send Josh Downs up to New England. Then we get to the Washington Commanders. I've gone interior offensive line each of the last 2 mocks for Washington. Last time I went with the direction of Connor Beebe. Here I'll go Andrew Voorhees. I think they're pretty closely ranked, in my opinion. Two really good long-term starters at left guard for their respective schools, Northwestern and USC for Voorhees. So both have really impressed, and both maybe had a little bit of a small step down in production this year versus last when you look at their PFF grades. But nonetheless, I'm not concerned. Both older prospects as well, so I feel pretty confident about being able to ask them to be plug-and-play starters. And I think this is just your clean Andrew Norwell replacement here with Voorhees. So makes a lot of sense in my opinion. Then we get to the Detroit Lions. I'm going to give them a TJ Hockenson replacement here and Dalton Kincaid. I think he's going to be my wide receiver 3. Him and Musgrave are really, really close. Musgrave had the injury, so I'll give Kincaid the bump here. I mean, he was one of the best parts of that Utah offense, so we'll love to see that. And again, obviously, there's an opening. Brock Wright started to find the end zone what felt like every week for Detroit, so maybe they don't want to move on from him, but I think for right now, I think Kincaid probably the best move to go forward with, get a young player at that position. And plus, maybe wide receiver, but you got Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams coming back, hopefully fully healthy next year in year 2. A couple good running backs. The offense, has some weapons to work with. We'll see what they do with the quarterback position, but let's go ahead and get a tight end and get one more asset in there where I think there is a clear upgrade potentially available. Next up, my Pittsburgh Steelers, and this is a pick I've been making a ton. I'll go JL Skinner. I just think he makes a ton of sense as a Terrell Edmunds, wrong Edmunds, brother. Terrell Edmunds replacement. He was on a 1-year, $5 million deal after they, couldn't find an extension, and they brought him back because they didn't have a strong safety replacement in-house. So brought Edmunds back, but I don't think it's a long-term pairing between Pittsburgh and Edmunds. So I think Skinner kind of brings a lot of that to the table. Great size, 6'4", can kind of be that linebacker. There were a lot of talks when Edmunds was drafted by the Steelers that maybe he'll be converted into linebacker. I think Skinner will probably have some of the similar conversations around him, but I think as a box safety with that type of length, that guy's going to get a ton of hands on football. He's held his own in coverage at Boise State. Lower level of competition, I understand, but he's held his own in coverage, and I think he's a high-level run defender in the making, with some proper coaching, of course. And I just love that potential Terrell Edmunds replacement for the black and gold. Next up, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm going to go Felix Ndike-Uzama. Two picks, both on the defensive side. It's tough with how bad Tampa's offense has looked. It's like, well, are you ignoring that? No, I'm not necessarily ignoring it, but I think a lot of that comes back to coaching because there's still talent on that side of the ball. So I'm looking at that defense. We added Brian Branch yesterday, and now let's give them Felix Ndike-Uzama, a guy who can win with speed. And I've been saying for a couple years now, the Bucs need that third pass rusher, and I think FAU can totally be that. And plus, long term, we don't know what Shaq Barrett's future holds in store, right? Like scary injury this year. How many more years is he going to be able to stay on the field? So could also be a potential replacement long term for Shaq Barrett. Back to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Yesterday we went O'Cyrus Torrence. Today we're going to go tight end Luke Musgrave. I said yesterday, I've put a lot of focus on putting weapons around Trevor Lawrence. And in this mock draft, not necessarily wide receiver tight end, but offensive line upgrade and then a tight end, giving him that one more weapon. We'll see what the Evan Ingram, situation plays out. Are they going to bring him back? He's on that 1-year deal. He's been pretty good this year. I wouldn't be surprised. But that being said, Doug Pearson's also the guy who was utilizing 2 tight end sets all the time in Philadelphia with Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert. So I wouldn't be surprised if he tried to do the same thing here. So even if they keep Ingram, I think tight end could still be potentially in their mind. But Musgrave only played 2 games this year at Oregon State, but really good athlete, really soft hands. And I'm excited to see what his potential in his future holds in store. And I'd love to see him get in an offense where young quarterback, but such a high potential in Trevor Lawrence. This would just, I think, be like the perfect situation for a Luke Musgrave to find himself in. Pick number 52, I'm going to go to the running back position for the Miami Dolphins, Jahmyr Gibbs. Thought about Darnell Wright, and I'm kind of surprised Darnell Wright's still on my board here because I think he's that fringe first, a second-round pick. And right tackle's the last position. I look at Miami's offensive line, I'm like, yeah, they can get better there. So honorable mention to Darnell Wright, but Jahmyr Gibbs and that run scheme, are you kidding me? Yeah, give me all that. Plus an awesome receiver out of the backfield. That Miami offense is scary enough as is when Tua plays. You give him Jahmyr Gibbs, oh my God. Might be insane. Also, if Mike McDaniel's anything like Kyle Shanahan, even though they have solid running back options right now in Jeff Wilson Jr. and Raheem Mostert, both those guys I think on last year's of their contracts, so that's a part of it as well. But even if those guys were back, if Mike McDaniel's anything like Kyle Shanahan, he'll draft a running back when you don't think he needs one. So Jahmyr Gibbs, to me, checks a lot of boxes for why he's the pick here at 52. Back to the Seattle Seahawks, the final pick we'll make for Seattle. I'm going to go to the edge here. Zach Harrison. And I even kind of mentioned this yesterday with Siaki Ika. They're kind of small right now at edge. Boye Mafe, Uchenna Nwosu, not necessarily the biggest, edge-setting edge rushers, right? So let's go give him a Zach Harrison. This guy is huge, 6'4", I think like 260-ish pounds off the top of my head. And I think he's legitimately got a shot to run in the 4.4s. This guy's straight line speed, not an issue. It's more so the bend, which I think he actually showed a little bit more of this year. But his consistency was certainly a problem at Ohio State. There were weeks where it's like, dude, Zach Harrison, why is this guy not in first round conversation? There's other weeks where it's like, he's not a top 100 pick because he's done nothing. So obviously, kind of a tough prospect to evaluate, but there is a lot of upside, I think. And you get a bigger body, stronger edge rusher to go into a rotation with Uchenna Nwosu and Boye Mafe. I really like that fit. Now you're looking at Seattle Hall that features a potential franchise future quarterback, an awesome nose tackle, a long lanky corner, and a power rushing edge. Man, that sounds like a pretty awesome draft haul if you're asking me, and if I'm a Seattle fan. Next up, New York Giants. Let's go Parker Washington here. We went Cam Smith yesterday, and I deliberated. I was like, yeah, I know Jordan Addison's still on the board here. But let's say they wait around and then go get Parker Washington. Right now, it's Richie James manning the slot. And hey, Richie James had a career year. I don't want to talk too much smack, but yeah, that's not your long-term guy. Parker Washington, I think, is a plug-and-play starter there at the slot. Can be a satellite player. Can also be a sharp route runner in the underneath and intermediate parts of the field. But there are also games and moments on his tape where that dude can go up and get it. He's got a little bit of Jahan Dotson. I'm not just helmet scouting here. Got a little bit of Jahan Dotson in him where it's like, dude, that dude at the catch point, given his size, has no business being that good in the air. But he is. So this could be a guy who checks a lot of different boxes. It does a lot of different things for Brian Dable and potentially Mike Kafka. We'll see if he's back as the OC. So love to see that. And then you go corner, wide receiver. Oh, if I'm a Giants fan, I'm having to roll it back with Daniel Jones. Those are the positions I want to address if I can't get a QB upgrade. Anyways, let's move on and let's talk about pick number 55, the Chicago Bears. I am going to go linebacker here. Sorry, I had to check my notes there, make sure I was talking about the right guy. I'm going to go Jack Campbell here. For Chicago, obviously, if they, we'll see what they do in the first round. And what they do ultimately trading back from the number one pick. I do think they trade back from one. If you didn't see yesterday's video, I kind of elaborate that pretty heavily. But it is easy to look at that defense and I'm like, or that team in general and be like, where can they get better? Oh, well, how about the places where they traded all their good players, right? They didn't re-sign Akeem Hicks. They traded Khalil Mack and Robert Quinn, and they traded Roquan Smith. So let's go ahead and get a Roquan Smith replacement. Jack Campbell is not going to impress you with his athletic ability. He is the linebacker version of Michael Mayer. He does everything else well, though. I mean, he actually graded out pretty well PFF's numbers in coverage, which is kind of surprising. I don't know how well that's going to translate to the NFL level, just because the athletic, ability of the people he's defending is going to take a pretty sizable leap up. But a great tackler, sound, high-level football IQ, and just instinctual. I think anything that's in front of him, he can get the job done. It's when, he's backing up a bit of coverage and, maybe manned up against somebody, that's where maybe I'll have some concerns. But I think minimum high-level run stopper and potentially, anytime Chicago drafts a linebacker, I'm always, perks my eyebrows. I'm like, okay, we'll see. It's kind of like the Steelers with wide receiver, the Vikings with running back, where I'm like, okay, you guys have a great track record of drafting that position. Let me see. So if Jack Campbell were the pick for the Bears, that would be a huge vote of confidence in my opinion. Next up, the Los Angeles Chargers. I'm going to go defensive line, and a guy I have not put in a mock draft yet. I'm going to go Mozzie Smith. Don't count out Mozzie Smith as a day 2 pick. I mean, I think third round is a pretty safe floor for him, but I wouldn't count out him being a second round pick. 6'3", 336, so he's got good size, and he's Bruce Feldman's #1 freak athlete. That was a preseason, ranking that he did, but athleticism talks, right? Like the NFL drafts athletes just as much as they draft, productive football players. So a guy who really turned it on, especially you look at the last 5 games he had at Michigan, was a really high level run defender for them and got better as his college career progressed as a run defender. So I think the run stopping potential is there. And then with his athletic ability, pass rush could follow suit. We'll have to wait and see, but minimum high level run defender, big enough guy to play in the middle of the defense. And he's really grown as a run defender in and of itself. So would love to see him being added into that Chargers defense. And we went Zay Flowers completing that offense in my mind in the first round. And now we give them a nose. If those players hit their potential, the Chargers are right there in that Super Bowl conversation, in my opinion. Next up, pick number 57, the Dallas Cowboys. I'm going to go wide receiver here. I'm going to go Jalen Hyatt. Let's just give him a long-term T.Y. Hilton. Why not? Like they bring him in on this, kind of finish the season. You're going to be our number 3 guy, and he's done a good job getting behind defenses. Now let's go get him a guy where they have contract control for 4 years over, and he's cheap. So Jalen Hyatt, limited route tree, so he may even fall a little bit lower than 57 because of that. But the speed talks, right? And if his role in Dallas is just be fast and work over the top, he can do that. So, and that's really all I think they kind of need. I think Michael Gallup, a little slow to come back from the injury, but I still like him as kind of a possession guy. CeeDee Lamb does everything. They need to give him the football as much as they can, especially this weekend against Tampa. And then Jalen Hyatt can just be that speed over the top, be that T.Y. Hilton. Just do it for 4 years and on a cheap contract. So, would love to see that fit. Then we get to pick 58. We went Darnell Washington in the first round. One of my favorite, under the radar, maybe sleeper first round picks I made yesterday. And here at pick 58, I'm going to go ahead and add some cornerback depth with Garrett Williams. Yeah, maybe he didn't take the hugest leap forward this year at Syracuse, if a leap at all, but I'm still intrigued by a guy who's 6 foot, 180 pounds, good athletic profile, and there was reason so many people were excited to see what he could develop into this year, right? So it may not have happened this season, but it doesn't mean it's never going to happen. So love to see him get into a defense. If Lou Anarumo is still there as the DC, I'd love to see him work his magic here with Garrett Williams. And furthermore, I thought the Bengals would really feel the loss of Chidobe Awuzie, but they really haven't. They've done a good job mitigating that loss, despite how good Chidobe Awuzie has been in Cincy. So I think Lou Anarumo and that staff in general on the defensive side of the ball in Cincy has done a great job developing and at least getting these guys to a playable level. And drafting a Garrett Williams may allow you to move on pretty comfortably from an Eli Apple. So that's always a big win, in my opinion. So next up, we get to the Lions. Final pick we'll make for Detroit in this video. I'm going to go back to the linebacker position. And he's definitely a project to Marvin Overshown, but he's a player who preseason my linebacker 5, and he's probably going to be right there, maybe the first honorable mention. 6'4", 235 pounds, excuse me, maybe even 240. So this dude is what you want in a linebacker. He looks like an NFL linebacker. High-level athlete as well. And this year at Texas, he made a huge stride as a tackler. He had one game where he had like 4 or 5 missed tackles, but for the entire season, lowest missed tackle percentage, lowest number of missed tackles individually. So I'm seeing some growth in his weakest area, which makes me really excited to see what he could grow into. He is not the most refined prospect, so it's kind of hard to gauge his value, but if a team's willing to take on a project and have this perfectly molded linebacker prospect, frame, athleticism, everything's there, and they can just work with that mold of clay, he could we could look back at this as a second, third round pick, whatever he ends up being, as like, wow, he fell that low. That's insane. Or he could be a guy like a Jelani Tavai. Maybe, I don't think Tavai had nearly the athletic frame and potential based off of his size and athletic ability that Overshown does, but nonetheless, where it's like, oh, that guy went in the second round. That's weird. So it's a little hit or miss, but I think 4th pick in the first 2 rounds, I think the Lions have a little bit of leeway to take a shot and potentially pair up, Overshown with Malcolm Rodriguez. It'd be a really fun pairing for the future. Anyways, long tangent aside, let's talk about the Carolina Panthers at pick number 60. I'm going to go Mike Morris here, 9 sacks. I can't find, that's right. The one knock I have against the draft, NFL mock draft database is a lot of these guys are not interior defensive linemen. Like Tui Tuipulotu, yeah, he did that at USC, but he's an edge. Will McDonald, yeah, I know he did it in college, but he's an edge. And then the same thing here with Mike Morris. And I could even say the same about Lucas Van Ness, but he has inside-out versatility, so I won't complain too much. But Mike Morris to me is an edge, and it gives Carolina another swing of the bat, essentially, of what Yetur Gross-Matos was supposed to be, this big, tall, strong edge opposite of Brian Burns. And 9 sacks, like I said, at Michigan, really kind of came into his own this year, and I'm excited to see where his progression continues to take him. Michigan's done a fantastic job, always having that next guy up, and Mike Morris was that this year for the Wolverines. Pick 61, the Buffalo Bills. I'm going to have them finally end the long drop for Darnell Wright. Again, a guy I think could potentially go in as early as like pick 28 to Denver. But here, I mean, Spencer Brown's been a little hit or miss. He was a small school guy, and high potential because good athletes. And he has the size, but it hasn't really worked out yet. And I can't think of their actual starter playing. Oh, David Quessenberry. Yeah, you don't want David Quessenberry playing football. That's why I couldn't remember. I was trying to purge him from my mind. So let's go ahead and try to find a potential upgrade there. Darnell Wright was awesome this year at Tennessee. Part of that is, I think, protection from the Josh Heupel offense. I think it does a good job keeping offensive linemen look pretty clean. But I still think there is something to it. I think he was really good this year. And late second round, what do you have to lose if you are Buffalo? And then we get to pick 62. Kansas City Chiefs. We went Nolan Smith in the first round. I'm going to actually stick in this offensive tackle class. I would go Cody Mock, but he's going to come with more body overhaul. He's this tight end converted into offensive tackle, coming from a small school, and they already have enough projects in mind. Like Lucas Niang hasn't really worked out, and Andrew Wiley's just been a disappointment. Blake Freeland, and part of this also coincides with what are you doing with Orlando Brown. Freeland has been really good at BYU at the left tackle spot, taking over Brady Christensen. He's been really solid as the start of the last 2 years. Small school, I understand, but depending on what happens with Orlando Brown and his contracts, potential plug-and-play replacement there at left tackle. The Chiefs are going to have to find an answer there if Brown walks. Or if you keep Brown, you work out a nice contract extension there, he could flip over to play right tackle, where I think this Chiefs offensive line, that's like the last missing component to a super scary offensive line for Kansas City. Already one of the best O-lines, but that right tackle spot is the one that's lacking. So Freeland, I don't know left to right with this selection, but either way, I think it's going to be a position of need that Kansas City is looking to address. And then what will actually be the final pick of the second round, we'll go ahead and do the Bears pick here at 64, but that is technically the first pick of the third round. But at pick 63, man, Jamie Robinson kind of feels like an underappreciated safety in this class. Transferred into Florida State and has done nothing but play great football. He played, if you look at a snap alignment, a pretty even mix between free safety, strong safety, and nickel corner. I said it yesterday when talking about Brian Branch. I love DBs. I can move all over the place. Majority of his snaps were at free safety, and to me, that's where I want to see him play for Philadelphia. They feel like a free safety away from just having the nastiest defense. I mean, and Johnson Gardner-Johnson's a turnover machine. He kind of serves as that, ball hawk. But man, if they got a true break on the football, go get it while it's in the air type of free safety, man, that team is just going to be impossible to throw on them, to be honest. With two good corners, if they bring Bradbury back. Long tangent aside, I feel like that's the one spot in the secondary they could potentially get an upgrade at. And I feel like, Jamie Robinson's being a little overlooked here, so I wanted to give him some shine and give him some respect. I really liked him a lot this year for Florida State. And then we'll end things off with the Chicago Bears. So we've gone edge, interior offensive line, linebacker. Realistically, they need two edge rushers. So I'm going to go ahead and go Will McDonald here. Forgot I had to go interior defensive line. So that wraps up the draft for the Chicago Bears. But yeah, I think they need two edge rushers. So McDonald, this guy who was undersized playing on the interior, and now I think he'll really get to thrive at the NFL level where he's kicked out to play edge rusher, line up outside of tackles, and I think he'll have a ton of success, a guy who can win with speed. Interested to see what moves he can add onto it. But here, first pick of the third round, I think that's an awesome value if you're the Chicago Bears. But that is going to do it for my updated 2023 NFL mock draft. Today we covered round 2. Again, let me know what you think about breaking up the video into 2 parts. Love to hear your feedback. The only way I know is if you tell me, so I'm not going to be offended. If you don't like it, just let me know that you don't like it. Or if you do love it, I'll continue to do it. So let me hear your thoughts. Let me hear your quarterback rankings, 1, 2, and 3, or if Young's your QB1, who is your QB2? And of course, who's your favorite team? And if this was their haul after day 2 or round 2, what would you grade it? What would you grade this draft if this was what were to happen for your favorite team? Love to hear your thoughts. I respond to every comment, so let's talk about this mock draft in the comments section. That's going to do it for me. Hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Tej, and I'm signing off.